On June 27, 1944, the U.S. Fifth Army had the Germans in northern Italy on the run that day. Army Air Force's First Lieutenant David Toomey, a pilot for the 3rd Photo Reconnaissance Group, took off from an airfield at Tarquinia, 50 miles north of Rome, to photograph German fortifications along the northern perimeter of the Arno River Valley from Florence to Pisa. It was his second mission over the territory in a week. Toomey flew a Lockheed F-4 named Ducky. The crew chief's pet name for his wife. The F-4 was a photo reconnaissance version of the P-38 Lightning. To get good tactical photos, pilots had to fly the airplane low, and to keep from being shot down, they had to fly it fast. His camera was mounted on the right side of the fuselage, so to photograph the northern area of the valley, Toomey would have to fly west at 1,500 feet. His approach took him north along the coast, then inland, just south of the Arno. He'd head east 50 miles to Florence, all at treetop level, to avoid German radar, pull a U-turn and come back along the valley to Pisa. That was the plan anyway. Today, Toomey lives on Camino Island, Washington, and the P-38 he flew that day lies on the floor of the Tyrrhenian Sea, a few miles off Italy's coast, hoping to find someone to confirm its location and finance its recovery. He and his colleagues have knocked on doors from Washington, D.C. to Washington State. The National Geographic Society was interested, but later decided not to pursue a project. Representatives of the Flying Heritage Collection, Paul Allen's museum in Everett, Washington, said that Allen purchases only airplanes that fly. Kermit Weeks, owner of Fantasy of Flight, a collection of flying historic airplanes in Polk City, Florida, told Toomey he already has a P-38. Even the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery declined. They told me I'd best let Ducky rest in peace. The day was pleasant, but windy and slightly overcast. I took off at 08.30 and headed out to sea and up the coast. Although Ducky was our oldest airplane, she was our fastest and old P-38 that had been stripped down and equipped with a pair of more powerful Allison V1710 turbo supercharged engines, each of which churned out more than 1,400 horsepower. Speed and the ability to fly at both low and high altitudes made the P-38 unnatural for photo recon fighters. As they say when battles Recons win wars. General Mark Clark, commander of the U.S. in the F-4, we flew mostly two types of missions: mapping runs and pinpoint runs. In mapping runs, we flew back and forth at 25,000 feet, photographing an area of 400 or 500 square miles. Our cameras were loaded with 180 feet of 12-inch wide film, which meant we could make a total of 180 exposures. Each exposure covered an area of 9 to 16 square miles and provided amazing detail on pinpoint runs. We flew to an isolated point of interest, such as a bridge, tunnel, or highway intersection. These missions required precise navigation to identify the target, which we did by correlating rivers, railroads, and towns with what we had on the map. Then it simply required 3 or 4 good exposures of the target. At least 2 were needed to produce the third dimension. Today's mission, though, was the rare and voluntary third type, a dicer from the word dicey, which our British friends used for risky. It was low and fast and left no room for error. It often put you face to face with the enemy. I had transferred to the P-38 just 6 months earlier from the co-pilot's seat in the lumbering B-17 bomber. My love affair with the P-38 had begun at age 17, when I spent the summer of 1940 living with my grandmother in Portland, Oregon, cutting grass and brush for the city on my days off. I went to the Portland Army Air Base to watch the airplanes take off and land. A squadron of P-38s was stationed there, I believe, flying submarine patrol over the mouth of the Columbia River. As the airplanes returned to their base and peeled up for their landings, they were poetry in motion. I became fascinated by their sleek twin-boom profiles and their graceful performance. Someday I vowed I was going to fly a P-38, 4 years later, here I was, flying the Sleeth Lockheed on my first solo flight in January 1944. I had left the ground at 100 miles per hour, but as I retracted the landing gear, the airplane seemed to jump out from under me. I went from 100 to 250 miles per hour so fast I couldn't believe it. I started climbing, and as soon as I got my coolant controls set, I nearly fell over. My altimeter said 10,000 feet. Even when I slowed the airplane down, I was going 250 miles per hour. Most of the time my airspeed was around 300. Imagine going a mile in 12 seconds, and you can understand 300 miles per hour. I saw 350 several times, and in short dives. I even reached 400. Speed was our only defense. The P-38 could generally outrun any of the Germans' airplanes in both a shallow climb or a dive. One day, a group of Messerschmitt Buff 109s jumped me, and I outran them to the coast. I think I made 500 miles per hour going downhill, but I hit serious turbulence and thought the airplane was going to come apart. The main spar between the engine booms and the gondola popped a bunch of rivets. When I got back, it was a wreck, and they jumped the airplane. The crew chief told me jokingly that I'd pushed on the throttle handles so hard I bent them. Bottom line, the most survivable photo Recon pilot was the one who was the most scared on this mission. I flew as close to the water as I could to conserve fuel. I flew through the strait between the Isle of Elba and the mainland rather than detouring around the island. I found the initial point I'd used before, then cut across the coast. The minute I crossed the front lines, I'd always get a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. In football, we used to call it the kickoff feeling. For me, it usually lasted up until I started my first run over the target. It was especially true for us in photo recon because we were always alone, with no wingmen or squadron mates to help watch for flak or enemy fighters. You had to do it all. Fly, navigate, survey, operate the camera, and never a friendly face nearby to buck up your spirits.